Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. In the early years of American history, the #1 killer of children was disease. Then came the automobile, and for many years, motor vehicle crashes killed more children than anything else. Now that's changed, and currently, the leading cause of death for American children is gunfire. In 2021, the last year for which we have complete statistics, nearly 3,600 American children between the ages of 1 and 18 were shot to death. What we're talking about here is a national tragedy of immense proportions. Black children are especially vulnerable. As the New York Times wrote, black children are now far more likely to be shot and killed than white children at every age, from the moment they can walk until they are old enough to vote. As bad as this sounds, and it's terrible, the killing of children and adolescents is just a small part of the overall toll of gun violence in the United States. In 2020, according to the latest tally, the one-year toll of Americans killed by firearms was an astounding 45,000. That's just 1 year. Why is this happening, and what can be done about it? We'll delve into that with my guest, David M. Kennedy, one of America's most knowledgeable experts on crime and violence prevention. He's a professor of criminal justice at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice here at CUNY and the director of John Jay's National Network for Safe Communities. Professor, welcome. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, Bob.
So we'll be talking a lot about the toll on children, the toll of gun violence on children in this program, but as I noted, that's part and parcel of the overall toll of gun violence in this country. So let's kind of start with the obvious. There's been this surge, I guess, since the start of the pandemic. We can talk about how the pandemic may have factored into this, but what's pushing this violence? What are some of the factors that are involved?
So that's the question we always ask. And it's not exactly the wrong question, but it's probably the second or third question we should ask. So the country pays attention to its gun violence toll when a couple of things happen. First and foremost, we pay attention when white folks get hurt.
Right.
And then we pay attention when things get worse from the already intolerable norm that we all live with and largely disregard. And then we pay attention when young people get hurt.
Mm-hmm. School shootings.
So that's a white folks comment, right? To think that the equivalent of when children get hurt is school shootings. Because almost all the children getting hurt are not being hurt in school shootings.
Exactly.
Right. This is the way the political discourse works. We're caring about gun violence as a country right now because of the school shootings, the mass shootings, the spree shootings, which are horrifying, and we ought to pay attention to them. Absolutely. Everything in that category is under 0.5% of the every year gun carnage. And the reason I'm being obnoxious about the cause question is because whatever the causes may be, the outcome has been very clear and very consistent, not just recently, not just since COVID, but for generations. And the reality is we have a terrible gun violence problem. That's true whether there's an increase or not. Right? The increase is on top of something already intolerable.
Sure, if we had a modest decrease, it would still be horrible.
Still be awful. And a modest decrease would get us back to what we thought was the normal before the increase, which
Right.
was intolerable. That regular generational day in, year out gun violence is horrifically concentrated amongst black folks. That's horrifically concentrated among black men.
Right.
And it's horrifically concentrated in particular neighborhoods. And it's driven by what my world now calls group violence, because most of us don't talk or care about gangs anymore, but that kind of really groupy, networked violence. and domestic and intimate partner violence. Those fall enormously on black men, black women, and their families, which is why, for the most part, children get hurt. And what we do routinely as a polity is completely ignore everything I've just said. Plus the additional fact here, which is that this is mostly about black men, and black men are 6% of the country and 50% of the homicide victims. And we know this, we largely ignore it, and when gun violence comes to the attention of people who don't deal with this day in or day out, either because they live it or because they're called to it, it becomes a story about school shootings, about white folks, and about kids, none of whom and none of which are any large part of the issue.
There has been a surge over the past couple of years. Why do you think that surge has occurred?
The first and most important answer is we just don't know. So I am a sort of academic. That's not just an academic fancy answer. We don't know. We really don't know.
Right.
And if you read the opinion world on this, I've started to divide the world into people who work for a living and people who have opinions for a living. If you look at the world that has opinions for a living, it's talking about increased gun purchases, about the collapse of institutions during COVID, about stress, about economic dislocation, about alienation from police. The most important thing to know about all of that is nobody who's saying any of those things has any actual evidence for any of it. They're having opinions, and they're perfectly valid opinions. We don't know what's going on. These days, because of kind of mismanagement by the FBI and the criminal justice world, as of this year, we're not even counting the dead people right anymore, because the systems that police and the FBI had set up to count homicide victims have broken in the last year.
And why?
The FBI put in an objectively, abstractly better way of tracking crime information that's so cumbersome that lots of police departments aren't using it.
So they're not reporting?
They're not reporting. So you and I are sitting in New York City right now. New York City NYPD did not report homicide statistics to the FBI for the last calendar year.
So you've made it clear sort of what's not happening or what's not the big issues. Most of the victims, especially if you look at the way the population is, are not white. Most of the killings do not occur at schools, which of course, if you talk to school principals or if you talk to police officers or police chiefs, they'll tell you that. You know,
schools
that's just a fact. As horrible as it is, if
yeah,
a bunch of kids get killed at school, nobody wants to minimize that at all. But that's not where most of it is happening. So you've been studying this for decades. What is happening? Where is it happening? Who's getting killed, and why are they getting killed?
So my shop at John Jay College, the National Network for Safe Communities, we research these issues, but we work on them. Principally, we are in operational relationships on violence prevention in the country and around the world. So we're in day-to-day contact right now with 50 cities around the United States, working with them on violence prevention, and the story remains really clear. The violence, even during this awful increase of the last couple of years, has remained concentrated in historically damaged Black, African American neighborhoods, communities of color. It is driven by what, again, in a move beyond talking about gangs, we now think about as group and group dynamics. So gangs, drug crews, robbery sets. You get intergenerationally active families. But those groups in any city will collectively represent under 0.5% of the city, and they'll be connected with 50 to 70% of all homicides. The next big driver after that is domestic violence and intimate partner violence, which also falls greatly disproportionately on women of color and then, of course, on their families. And that seems not to have changed during the pandemic and in the wake of the protests over the murder of George Floyd, which very much further estranged police from these communities. And what seems to have happened is that those existing dynamics got worse. And so there's more group violence, there's absolutely more domestic and intimate partner violence. Many of those events involve a lot of victims. So the tracking of what people think are the Virginia Techs and the Uvaldes and the Tree of Life killings, what I'll call spree shootings. The FBI's definition for those events involves 4 or more victims in an incident.
Right.
And there are huge numbers of those across the country, which most people look at and think those are those spree shootings, they're happening every day. Those are overwhelmingly street conflicts amongst gangs, groups, drug crews, criminal networks, and they're overwhelmingly domestic and intimate partner violence incidents in which the almost always male abuser kills and injures lots of people. And that's what was happening before this, and all the evidence from the front lines is that it's what's happening still.
So we can't ignore the proliferation of guns in this society, and the Supreme Court has ruled last year that Americans don't just have a right to have guns in the home, but they have a right to carry guns in public. More and more people are arming themselves. Do you feel that this is a factor that's just going to make this hideous situation that we're talking about worse? Do you imagine that it can only get worse?
My imagination for quite some time has been that, at least on the guns as guns front, it is only getting worse, and it's only going to get worse. The legal and cultural tides are all moving in the wrong direction here as far as public safety is concerned. Now, having said that, again, there's no reason to really believe right now that the increase in, let's just call it, legitimate civilian ownership of guns. So it's legal whether we like it or not. It's legal, and the people who are doing that are obeying the law. There's no indication that that's making anything more than a very small difference in violence.
So that's not driving the killing of lots more people.
It does not seem to be.
Right.
Partly because, again, the single largest driver of the violence is happening in circles where acquiring, owning, storing, carrying guns is already illegal. It is happening through criminal mechanisms and in the
And the people already have guns. It's illegal, and they have guns.
And they're getting them and they're using them, but concealed carry and right to carry and the Supreme Court decisions are making next to no difference with that kind of thing.
But you made an interesting point in a discussion we had before the program. You were talking about why so many people feel the need to arm themselves now. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So the main thing that drives gun acquisition these days, so we're in a very nearly post-sporting world, right? People who had guns traditionally in the United States overwhelmingly got them for marksmanship sort of sport, or for field and stream hunting kind of sport,
yep.
but it was sport, recreation, regardless. And there was always a self-defense element in that. But that's flipped. The main reason that people get guns now, and the survey evidence is very clear on this, is self-defense. And there are two drivers of that, really. One is the actual, real, completely objective and horrific high risk being felt by especially these very small active worlds in the communities where gun violence is concentrated, which is part of a robust illegal dynamic, right? So it's not to say this is moral or ethical or anything like it, but you say to any gang member, why do you have a gun and why do you carry? And he will say, because that guy over there is trying to kill me.
Right.
And he's right. And if you go to the other guy, he says exactly the same thing, right? So again, this is not a good idea, but their objective risk is astronomical. The second driver is the kind of cultural media drumbeat that tells people who aren't really at risk that they are at risk.
You're unsafe.
And that's driving gun acquisition. And then what you get on both sides, and this is kind of culturally fascinating and just awful. On both sides, so what we're really talking about is the extreme political spectrum. Whether you're on the political extreme left or the political extreme right and thinking about public safety policy, among other things, just about the only thing you agree on is that you don't trust the government. And if one of the primary roles of the government is to keep people safe, and big chunks of the polity no longer trust the government to do, among other things, that,
right,
then they feel like they're on their own and they are arming themselves.
Now, we get to the issue of what can be done about this, and you've been in the forefront of, and there are a lot of people who are trying to do something to curb gun
Not
violence.
just trying, actually doing it, yeah.
So talk about it. Talk about what needs to be done and what is actually being done and who's doing it.
So let's again note that the normal answers to the question you've just asked begin with and are usually contained with a pretty traditional gun control debate.
Right.
So should there be guns out there? Who should have them?
Should they be confiscated?
The days when there was any real political prospect for banning handguns, for example, is long behind us.
That's over.
You and I both remember when that was at least theoretically a live option. But it's, should we have assault weapons? Should we do background checks?
Right.
That kind of thing. And let's just again note that that entire policy menu is almost completely focused on the gun violence that hurts mainstream white folks.
Right.
And the kind of gun violence that routinely kills huge numbers of people in black and brown neighborhoods is largely driven by weapons obtained illicitly, used illicitly, and none of those issues, even if
Right.
they were acted on, would make much difference.
Gun registration wouldn't mean, gun licensing, gun registration would not mean anything.
Rounding error in the violence. And the huge progress that's been made in this area, and it is enormous. When I began this work, my work in this area 30 years ago, there was nothing that we knew worked. There was nothing that in today's language we would call evidence-based. Now there is. And the turning point here has been recognizing the facts on the ground. The violence is fantastically concentrated in very specific ways in very specific neighborhoods.
Geographically, we know where it's occurring.
And socially and behaviorally, we largely know what's going on because, again, it is what most people would have called gang violence and things like that. And it is domestic and intimate partner violence.
Right.
And the breakthroughs here have come in focusing not on guns or the economy or racism or education or root causes, but on the violence. There didn't used to be the equivalent of sort of frontline medicine on this, that when somebody was hurt in a car crash, people didn't talk about cars, they saved the guy's life.
Right.
There are now ways to save those lives, and the biggest advances have come in focusing on these group violence, group dynamics, identifying the very small number of most active groups, their patterns of disputes and alliances. The streets are really driven by vendetta. This is not random. It's clearly identifiable. Within that small world of active people, there's an even smaller world of hyperactive people. And identifying them, dealing with their disputes, stabilizing them, working to keep them safe, moving them into services, dealing with their family issues. If you go to the corner to sell drugs because your brother's hungry, put food on the table, let you back off from that. And on the policing and law enforcement side, a kind of direct engagement that doesn't begin with, federal RICO cases, but by sitting people down and saying, you're at enormous risk, we want to keep you safe, who's trying to hurt you. You need to know your legal exposure, what you're doing is illegal and there are consequences. Here is what the official world is doing about this violence. We want you to know ahead of time so it doesn't have to happen. And that mixed portfolio has been the most effective violence prevention work ever.
So what would be needed to expand that effort, to make it more effective,
well,
to reach more people?
I never thought I would be able to say this because we spent have spent decades trying to get the official world to pay attention to this. But in this administration, and for the first time in history, this Biden administration is moving hundreds of millions of dollars into what it is calling community violence intervention, this kind of very pragmatic, get up every day, do the work. It's not a culture war. It's not a gun control debate. There are half a dozen people in this neighborhood who are at fantastic risk of hurting or getting hurt, and what are we going to do today to stop this from happening?
Mm-hmm. So you've been looking at this so closely for so long. Can you talk a little bit about the consequences of the gun violence? It
destroys individuals' lives. It destroys families' lives. It ripples through entire neighborhoods. The school shootings, the spree shootings, have given, for example, white parents a tiny taste of the fear of sending your kids off to school and wondering if they'll come back. Black and brown families have lived with that every day forever. And it's not ephemeral. It's very, very real for them. We know it grossly inhibits local economic development. You can now trace the effect of gun violence on local economies. We know it undercuts schools. We know it undercuts healthcare. We know it puts incredible burdens on local institutions. We know it affects, as you said, children's cognitive development and school performance. Entire communities are exposed to levels of trauma that are above those that returning active military deal with. And then beyond that, and all you have to do is think about this and realize how true this is, it polarizes us politically. It creates the kind of knife fight about guns and gun control that we're so used to, which is even exacerbated now.
Right.
It drives our culture in horrifically awful, polarized directions. So you have folks on the right looking at black and brown neighborhoods and saying, These are communities in complete moral collapse.
Just throw up your hands.
Even though we know that almost nobody, literally almost nobody in those neighborhoods wants anything to do with violence. And my friends on the left who think they're being supportive here say appalling things like we have to get to the boys before they're 8 because after that it's too late. As if without massive government intervention, these are communities that can't raise their own kids safely, which we know is absolutely empirically not true.
I am gonna have to stop you there. I wish
I could continue.
No, I understand. I wish I didn't have to stop you because we've run out of time, but maybe we can do a show where we can get more into detail about the consequences. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here today. We've been talking with Professor David Kennedy about gun violence in America. I'm Bob Herbert. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.